Good morning and welcome to church. We are so thankful that you have chosen to join us here today, and I've got one special reminder announcement before we dive in any further. Sunday, June 6th at 10 a.m. is our next All Together at the Park, and before I tell you the location, keep in mind that this is a different location than we've been at the last few months. We will be meeting at 10 a.m. on June 6th at the Pavilion at Theater in the Park, which is located off of 79th and Renner Road. Now, a couple other things for you to know about that morning. First off, there is plenty of picnic table seating, so you only need to bring chairs if you prefer to spread out a little bit more than those tables allow. Secondly, masks continue to be optional as we meet outdoors, so you can decide that at your own discretion. Thirdly, we have the pavilion rental until 1 p.m. that day, so we invite you and encourage you to bring a picnic lunch to join us after the service, just for some extra hangout time and the opportunity to connect with one another. Now, we do continue to ask you to RSVP for these park services because two things happen for us. It helps us know and anticipate how many people will be there, and then it also allows us to communicate if we need to about anything, whether that's weather or after the service, anything at all. So that RSVP link has already been sent out in our newsletter. So if you have not joined our newsletter, you can go to gatheringnetwork.org, scroll to the bottom of the page and join us there. And then also the RSVP link will be live tomorrow on our website at gatheringnetwork.org. We cannot wait to be with you guys on Sunday, June 6th. Go ahead and get it in your calendars now. Plan to bring your lunch with you, and we look forward to being together.
Good morning, Gathering Network. I'm Ryan, and I'm so glad to be with you today. I'm here to encourage us this morning, so I want to encourage you right now to just take a deep breath, a few deep breaths even, and just try to ground yourself in this present moment that we're in. Just take an inventory of what you're feeling in your body, in your mind, what you're carrying into this moment. I know we're all carrying so much. Our weeks may have looked a little chaotic, a little stressful. And I just want to encourage all of us that Jesus is carrying all these things with us, and that he's so present and attuned to us in all of the things we're carrying. So just want to encourage you that you can be wherever you are right now, and that Jesus wants to be there with you in those things. So we have some announcements for you this morning. So let's watch these slides together, and we will be back with a call to worship.
Hello there, friends. My name is Tom Page, and I serve on the elder team here at the Gathering Network. The role of the elder team is to care for, shepherd, and protect our church family, and also to discern the vision that God is calling us to live into. Today, I am checking in to give you a sense of what is going on in our team, with more to come in the future. Now that we are entering into more flexibility around COVID, we know that having more information would be helpful. And so we want you to know that the elder team is currently in a full-on prayer and discernment mode as we seek God around two main themes. The first, what is he asking of us in this present moment? The second, where is he leading us into the future? As we discern these things, it would be very valuable for the elder team to hear what questions you have regarding this next season of life together. This feedback will help us see if there are any consistent themes in our community and better discern what God is doing in our larger spiritual family. We have created a simple questionnaire for you that you can access at the top of our webpage. If you haven't already, be sure to sign up for the All Church newsletter at gatheringnetwork.org. We love you. We are so proud of you. You are exceptional people, and we want to hear from you because we trust that Jesus is working in you. So please respond to the questionnaire. However you access it, it really will be a great help to us. Take care.
Our call to worship this morning comes from Psalm 104, verses 24 and 25. O Lord, what a variety of things you have made. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Here is the ocean, vast and wide, teeming with life of every kind, both large and small. As I was reading this, I was just thinking about my time in California this last weekend. I got to visit some friends and family, and I got to see the sun rise over the ocean horizon, and it was just beautiful. I really love being able to see that. And I was just reminded of the beauty of the waves crashing over and over again. You know, they always come in, the tide always comes in, and one wave after the other just consistently keeps happening. And the same thing with the sun. As it was rising, I was thinking the sun always has risen and it always has set. And I just love the calm, consistent, predictable nature of those things, and love the fact that we can see those same characteristics of God in nature. And I was just comforted by that He is trustworthy, He is faithful, He's consistent, and I just love that He speaks to us through nature. Let's just get out there in nature more and try to let Him speak to us through the trees, through a quiet, calm afternoon, watching the birds at Loose Park, whatever it is. He's always wanting to speak to us, and He's always wanting to show His glory that He's made. So if you would just pray with me, open your hands, and we can pray together. Father, thank you for being the consistent one in our lives, the faithful one who's always pursuing us and wanting to show us that you love us, that you care about us, you're our provider, and that you're holding all of these things together, the sun, the moon, the stars, all the creatures, the ocean. You've set all these things into motion, Lord. You are great, wonderful, and you are worthy to be praised this morning. We love you. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.
I will not fear, I won't be afraid. God is a lamp unto my feet, He guides me. He is the same today and every day. He leads me through the terror that befalls me. This world is not my home, and I am not my own. This world is not my home, my home. Sing that again. I will not fear, I won't be afraid. God is a lamp unto my feet, He guides me. He is the same today and every day. He leads me through the terror that befalls me. And this world is not my home, and I am not my own. This world is not my home, my home. Oh, remember how far He's brought us. Oh, remember He is always near. Oh, remember His promises. Remember He will carry us. Remember, I will not fear, and I won't be afraid. And God is the rock beneath my feet, so steady. He is the same today and every day. He leads me through the tempest that surrounds me. This world is not my home, and I am not my own. This world is not my home, and I am not my own. This world is not my home, and I am not my own. This world is not my home, my home. Oh, remember how far He's brought us. Oh, remember He is always near. And remember His promises. Remember He will carry us. God is our deliverer. Oh, remember He is always here. Oh, remember His promises. Remember He will carry us. Remember, this world is not my home, and I am not my own. This world is not my home, and I am not my own. This world is not my home, and I am not my own. This world is not my home, my home. Sing, oh, remember how far He's brought us. Oh, remember God is always near. And remember He will carry us. Remember He will carry us. Remember. Oh, we remember You, Your goodness today.
You guys, good morning. I'm so glad that you decided to join us for church here online today. Hey, I know that a lot of you guys are wondering what's next and what our plan is for the future as things start to open up around us, as our city starts to open up. And this morning, I thought we'd do something. I thought that I would tell you the story of the Gathering Network. And this is the reason why, because in our stories are these, what we're going to call today, sovereign foundations. Sovereign foundations are these things that God has shaped in us, these foundations, these foundational experience that God has woven into our lives in our past that are becoming the things that He's going to use to build our future upon. And so Jack is going to help me this morning. We actually did a Zoom call together where he was just mining out the Gathering Network's story just as a good friend. I've asked him to play the Gathering Network role in the storytelling. So he's going to be the curious one, the inquisitive one, to try to mine out a lot of the story from me today, because where we're going is found in many ways in where we've been. That who we're becoming is who God has shaped us to be. And so listen closely this morning and enjoy this story about the Gathering Network, and we'll see you in the discussion questions later on.
Jon, thanks for bringing me in. I can't believe we get to do this.
It is so fun. This is going to be amazing. Like, I want to tell this story, and I just started to think, how can I do this in a way that's going to feel like it's conversant? So your role today is to play the Gathering Network, all right? Because
put on that hat.
Like, I'm wanting to tell this story to everybody. I didn't just want to sit here in front of my camera and just like talk into a lens. I wanted there to be a name and a face. So interact with me, man, while we're doing this today, and get curious and ask whatever questions you feel like you need to ask. And I'll just try to dive.
I will. Well, it's fun for me to flip the script on you, because you and the team are bringing in all these thought leaders that are blowing our minds, and you and JB have been great facilitators. So excited to put you in the hot seat.
Yeah,
ask you some questions. And some questions, that I'm feeling right now, just culturally, with COVID, reopening, is just what is next? I think a lot of people have that question, like, what is the Gathering Network doing next? Where are we going next? And so just to start things off, like, what's on your mind as you think about kind of this new era we're going into?
Yeah, a lot is on my mind.
Yeah.
Actually,
I
that's
believe
nothing new. But it is funny, man, because you're not alone. Like, I think everybody wants to know that. The two questions that I get, now, more than any other questions, are where are we going and what are we doing? And a lot of that has to do with the fact that things are suddenly open, like things have been so closed. And then now in this post-vaccination world, whether you got the vaccination or you didn't, it's a new day, like even just today, like Mayor Lucas had lifted all the restrictions, and it's like a world back to normal in KC which is weird, man. And it kind of caught up with us all of a sudden. And now, as things have been slow, now everything is kind of like open, and there's sort of this like like this rush to kind of get back to.
Calendars are filling up. Like, what are your vacation plans? Like, people are just getting stuff on the books right now.
Oh, they're ready to get back out for sure, man. And I have experienced that this way. I think that there are two questions that may be better or more helpful for us as a church right now. Questions are maybe more specific than these vague questions of like, where are we going and what are we doing? Which could be like, well, we're going a lot of places and doing a lot of things.
Right.
So these other two questions might be, who has God called us to be, and what has God called us to do?
Okay, so that's a bit of like a slowed down question. That's important. So thanks for leading us back into that place before. Like, what are we going to go do? Who are we as people individually, also as a community? So help me understand that?
Yeah, well, man, I think that as things open up, we're not the same. I mean, our culture is not the same, and we would like to believe that we are, but things have really changed, and COVID has really changed us. And what we went into COVID doing may not be the thing that we come out of COVID doing, because COVID happened and we were shaped. And that experience was an experience that brought us here. And so for me, the greatest sense of normalcy in my life is who God has called me to be and the things that God has called me to do in any era of my life. Those things have not changed. And so I thought it would be fun today if you and I went back through the story of the Gathering Network, because it's in the story that we can find the sovereign foundations, these firm stepping stones that God has shaped in us that will give us a firm footing as we move forward and as we go into the future together.
Well, this is going to be fun for me because I know some of the story. I don't know all of this story. So I'm excited to have you take us back there. So if we're going back to the beginning, we'd probably have to go back to like early 90s, like when I was born, 1991.
Were you born in 1991?
I was, yeah. That's like when the Gathering Network was born too. So
graduated high school in 1991, bro.
So good. But I think that's where we're gonna have to start, like as we think about the sovereign foundations of us as a church and a community. So take us back. What was 1991?
Yeah. Okay. Well, this part. Any of this is going to be really interesting, because what's true of every story is that it's always told from the perspective of the storyteller, right? And I'm very aware that Jordan may have a different view on some of these experiences. Other people may have a different view of some of these experiences. Glenn would certainly have a different view of some of these experiences. That's the way it goes, telling a story. But I do think that it matters. I did run all this by Jordan a little bit just to make sure that some of the facts were straight.
Good. Okay, it's been fact checked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope.
Yeah.
I didn't go through every one. So, I'm very much a P on the Myers-Briggs. I'm not a J. Details aren't my jam, man. It's more about the spirit of things, Jack.
We'll with that caveat. So it's John's perspective.
Yeah.
In the spirit of it.
The spirit of 1991.
Yeah.
In the earliest foundations of the Gathering Network were this: Glenn Kaler had a dream and a passion, a call of God on his life to shape and form a next generation of leaders for the future. And he was carrying this dream of what would become the Leadership Training Project, LTP. LTP was the initial college ministry at Heartland Community Church, our parent church. And it started in 1991. And so it's drastically, minimized for me to kind of like speak about this first era between, 1991 and 2004, but we just don't have that much time. So in that era of time, the Gathering, which was the college ministry of Heartland, was a seasonal ministry. The summers were full of college kids that were a part of LTP, that were around Heartland. They were all getting shaped and formed in this leadership training intensive led by Glenn and others, and fantastic leaders that you guys know that are leading us today. Jason Hamilton, if you've been around the Gathering, you'll hear more about this guy. Isaac Anderson, Jordan, was an LTP. I mean, the list is very, very long. Jesse Chesley, Ryan.
I still meet people around town, and I mention the Gathering, and they tell me, "Hey, I did leadership training project."
Absolutely, man. It's everywhere. I mean, that ministry raised up so many people. So if we're looking for sovereign foundations back in our history, back to the very earliest roots of our existence, is this idea of leadership formation. And by the way, I don't know if you can tell this, but my neighbor, bless him, love them so much. Just love you with the love of the Lord. All of you people who decided to start mowing your yard right now.
Love it.
Yeah. So yeah, man, in our very earliest foundation, I mean, it was leadership training, all the way back to the beginning.
So that was going on in KC Metro, but where were you in this time? Like, what was God doing in your life? What was your sovereign foundation that was being built in 1991?
Nice question. Well, in 1991, I was graduating from high school. Years just prior to that, I had a really formational experience at another friend's youth group. They were experiencing this kind of bit of revival in the Southern Baptist youth group in prayer. And I remember walking in to this room with them one day, and they were all praying, like leaving it on the field kind of prayer. I'd never seen this before. And something got shaped in me. I was like, that's how you do it right there. Like, that's how you see stuff come into being. You pray that way, and then you see God move. And that idea shaped me, and it began to follow me around like forever. So yeah, that led to college. In college, after, well, it was in my years right after high school, I had a pretty incredible encounter with the Holy Spirit. So I had a new frame of the Holy Spirit. I was like, God really wants to be involved in my life and empower and animate my life. Like, not just do this like static God thing, but like a life like really alive in God is the point. Like, he wants to make me fully alive in him. Like, that's the real deal. And I went to college, started a weekly Bible study thing that was born in a small group of people praying. And then that thing that was really small just blew up and got really big. The band that was leading that became the band that I toured with for a little while after college. I don't know if you know this, Jack, but it was kind of a big deal.
I know about Nickel and Dime. I'm encouraging our audience to look it up. Dude,
like, it's like if you were a teenager in Stuttgart, Arkansas, you may have wanted my autograph.
Oh, I totally believe it. No doubt.
It's so weird. But yeah, man, I was out there doing the thing, like touring, leading worship at that time. All of that really built out of this place in prayer. But something really interesting happened. I was on the road and touring away from our house church. I mean, away from our like church in Little Rock. And in order to stay kind of filled and fed, I got this book called The Mind of Christ, which was a weekly Bible study thing. And I was going through it in the back of the van. Told this story a lot of times. What it did for the first time in my life is it showed me the life of Christ, and I had never seen it before. And I learned very quickly that it's possible to be a Christian and not know Jesus at all.
Not just be a Christian, but a professional Christian, like, doing music, and you're waking up to like, who's this Jesus man, his life.
A pro-Christian, and like did not know Jesus the man. I knew him as an idea. I knew him as a very significant person in the Bible, but didn't know him so much that his life affected my life. My life had been really shaped by Paul, by all of the epistles of Paul, and I had never really, launched into the life of Jesus. And there was a part of that was really sad for me. I remember just like weeping in the back of the van, like, God, I've never known you. Like, your life means so much. And I've never known you. And I remember like passages like the one we read this morning, like Isaiah 61, where there would be this ministry of blessing, this ministry of reconciliation, this ministry of releasing, this ministry of like old things becoming new. I was like, that's not really ever been my Christianity, that's never really been my church. And all of a sudden, the person, the man, Jesus Christ, began to shape my life in a new way. Even that passage, Isaiah 61, was written and tattooed across my heart in an amazing way,
So you're in the band then, and Jesus is, looking at you, you're feeling that shaping. So how did, your life become shaped, in that season?
Yeah. Well, it didn't take long for the band to be over, right? Because we were on this trajectory to kind of, get Christian famous. And just felt like the Lord had different ideas for me, because I was like, man, like everybody in my life looks like me, thinks like me, talks like me, believes like me. I didn't know a lost person, a widow. And I was like, God, I just really want to be around the kind of people that Jesus was around. So quit the band, moved into this church, started a church in downtown Little Rock that again was born in prayer. In the very first year, speaking of Sovereign Foundations, like the very first year of our existence as this small group of people who were just leaving it on the field in prayer, we saw 17 people come to Christ in our first year, just as a house churchy sort of vibe, even though I thought that the real point was to start a Sunday service, which we then did, which then ultimately killed the thing. And I didn't know that like what we were doing on Tuesday nights was actually just so legit and pure, like just keep doing that thing, and then all of a sudden my life started to be about sermon writing and sermon planning and service administration, and not about doing just the simple things of the kingdom and living like Jesus in a place where my life was looking like his life. Is like I was kind of back to doing the professional Christian thing,
So Glenn's in Kansas City, and there's this Sovereign Foundation of leadership training. You're in Little Rock. There's this Sovereign Foundation of prayer and worship, but this holy discontent. And then, so how do these worlds come together? How does it happen?
It was in a really serendipitous moment in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I was there leading worship for college ministry there. He came down there thinking that he was going to see their worship band, and instead met me. And then we went to lunch, and I experienced what people always experience around Glenn, which is that sort of, that black hole of fatherness and care. You just get sucked into it, where he's like, I see you, man, and I love you. And and I'm like,
you were sold.
He became an instant mentor to me in my life. And for another 2 years, the church went on. I had a really traumatic experience, the accident in my family that a lot of you guys know about. Lost my sister in a car accident. I was with her. Church went on for another 2 years with me as the only staff member. And I just needed something different. God graciously closed that church down, very beautifully, actually. And I was looking for the next thing, and came to Kansas City and met Alyssa on one of those ministry trips. And Glenn took advantage of a moment of weakness in my life and offered me a job. And I said, yes, man, to get the girl. And here I am, dude, still to this day. Yeah.
So that's probably 2005-ish,
2004, I moved to Kansas City. 2004. Yeah.
You moved there. Yeah. And then that's what begins, I think, is what a lot of people know as the Gathering, kind of in a previous era of this kind of explosive prayer and worship time in Kansas City. Give us just a snapshot of that era.
Yeah. Well, the Gathering had been going on for some time. The Leadership Training Project had given birth to this service, and it was called the Gathering. I think maybe it was even called something else prior to that. But yeah, the Gathering was in existence when I landed in 2004, and certainly that's not about me landing here at all, but my role was to see a hunger to meet the next generation in their hunger to worship God. So I came as a vocational worship leader. We started to build the band. Isaac Anderson was leading the Gathering at that time. He's kind of like a hero of that era. And he's an amazing teacher. And on Sunday nights with this really small group of people, we started leading worship, and Isaac started teaching. He started teaching on the heart of God. And when Isaac would teach on the heart of God, the love of the Father, it would feel like books were falling out of that guy's mouth, man. Like so prolific and so profound as a teacher. And then we just saw it happen again. It was like the back road just kept getting further and further and further away. And we went through this little window of time where the Gathering was really tan and popular in Kansas City.
Tan and popular.
It was like we were kind of the thing, like it was kind of cool to be a part of it. And it was really electric and exciting, man. It was awesome. I look back at that season, and I still have I can still feel it in my body. Like I can still feel in my body the weight of God's glory and presence when we would gather. And I guarantee you, like some of you guys who were even new at the gathering, who were introduced to the gathering in 2007, maybe 2009, in that window, you know what I'm talking about. There's this sense of like this nearness, this power, this glory of God that was in the room at that time, especially when we would move toward any kind of justice conversation. And one of the really amazing things that was happening in that season was through Alyssa Shirley's leadership and Jordan Bonfield's leadership, we made a relationship with Food for the Hungry. We started to sponsor hundreds of kids in Africa. So much so that Food for the Hungry came to the gathering and they're like, what are y'all doing? Like, we've never seen the next generation respond to what we're doing quite like it's happening. We saw, I don't even remember how many hundreds of kids get sponsored through college kids. It was amazing. So we had these themes of worship, prayer, justice, and it was on a Food for the Hungry trip in Africa that one of the leaders there gave me a book called Discipling Nations. And that book, when I got home and read it, was the first time that I had ever read a holistic argument for why we should be making disciples. And that book wrecked me because I had never in my Christian life ever learned how to make a disciple. Maybe even argued like, well, discipleship is something pastors do, but it's not what we should all do. And he's like, this book was like, no way, man. And I went to the Great Commission, like Matthew 28, verse 18. And it's, and it kind of blew the dust off this passage for me. And it says this, it says, then Jesus came to them, to his disciples, and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teach them to obey everything that I've commanded you to do. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. That passage of scripture became itself a sovereign foundation for the Gathering Network in that season. At the end of that season, right about 2007, Isaac started to dream about going to grad school. He eventually went to grad school. And the leadership of the gathering was handed to me. I took it like fearfully. And then there was another father in the city who handed me a book called The Shaping of Things to Come. And that book radically spoke into my imagination and my life at that time. Not only mine, but also Glenn's as well. And we were going through this period of time because this other weird thing that God was saying to me as I would stand in front of the gathering and lead worship, there's hundreds of kids out there, I just felt like the Lord was whispering in my ear, like he was just saying, this is not going to change the city. And I remember just being so confused by that, and I'd be like, but there's all these kids here, like this is amazing. And he wasn't saying that it wasn't amazing. He was just sort of seeding something in my heart that there was going to be a new thing coming. And so Isaac goes, the book, The Shaping of Things to Come, is given to me. And every single page is like a prophetic bomb. And I'm realizing that so much of my experience in Little Rock was this sovereign foundation that was leading up to this place.
Yes.
And even though I love the gathering and even though the gatherings, and I felt gifted for them to lead large groups like that, once again, I started to crave and I started to see that what God wanted to do with the next generation was to shape these small groups. In the very beginning, we were calling them dinner with friends.
Yeah.
Just this idea that friends could come together around the word, around a meal, and they could just begin to practice hospitality and invite their friends into a space where they could really begin to discover and know Jesus around a table very differently than in a large attractional room. Because I was, every single Sunday night when I would get in my car to go leave the gathering, the Lord would just remind me with the houses right across the street. He was like, those people don't know you even just did what you just did,
Well, it was a major shift that you took. I think it was around 2009 to take dinner with friends and turn it into like what we knew as missional communities.
Yeah.
Talk us through that transition.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and that happened. That happened. So it's an interesting thing. Like back in Little Rock, I guess this is maybe one of the reasons why we're talking about, you know, life back in Little Rock. There was a man that was living in Little Rock at that time, and I was living with a family actually who would listen to me talk about my church, and they're like, "You've got to meet this guy that is in Little Rock right now that's pastoring our church. His name was Mike Breen." And like, "You've got to meet this guy." And I did meet him one time on the street, and I only thought he was cool because he knew the Christian band Delirious from. That's the only reason why I thought he was cool.
He has street cred, literally.
Yeah. And and so I never really had like a real conversation with him. But what was interesting was that as I was reading The Shaping of Things to Come, he was getting name dropped like crazy in that book, because from Little Rock he'd moved back to Sheffield. In Sheffield, he had started this movement around this idea of missional communities, which are small groups of people, small spiritual families that were living an up in and out life, right? Well, by that time we had already received, we stole them from Nava, their 3 loves. Like those were sort of the values of the gathering at the time: love God, love each other, love the world. And here's Mike talking about up in and out. There were just very similar values. And the whole idea of missional communities is that you would enter into like a space of discipleship, not in a large room, because that's not where it can happen, but in a small spiritual family. And so as 2008 comes to an end and we get to 2009, you know, Jack, our hearts were really shifting. Our hearts were really shifting around. At the same time, we were experiencing this economic downturn. And Heartland was like, you know what? We think the gathering can stand on its own. So we want to plant the Gathering Network. And Glenn put his hand in the air and he's like, if you're going to plant the Gathering Network, I'll go with it. So Glenn Kaler is doing this amazing thing late in his ministry life. He's basically saying like, I'm going to do this risky thing and go with this like group of college kids. We're going to go start this church. And we were going to start it around this different frame, not the large, loud, you know, raucous, like something, but like more relational, where discipleship would be at the core, where we were going to live out the Great Commission, where we were going to see this man, Jesus, shape our lives, and we were going to follow closely behind him. And it was going to be this spiritual and social experiment where we were like, we're going to just go after it and see what kind of things come. And right as we were dreaming about it, Matt Adams, who a lot of you guys would know, one of the regional directors here in Kansas City now of Young Life, also a dear brother and a member of the Gathering Network, was living in Germany at the time, and he handed us a book called Clusters. And that book was written by none other than Mike Breen. Who,
third time, he's everywhere. He's in all the books. Now. He's writing all the books. He's seen you on the street. Yeah, he's got your number.
Absolutely. So by that time, we were like, gosh, we just got to find this guy. That book was all about how to do the kind of group that we were intuiting God was leading us into. So we hunted him down. And it turns out Mike was living back in the United States at this time and living in Pawleys Island. So we hunted him down, and he was doing these trainings to train people how to live this life. Well, we call him up one day, and literally he and this guy named Steve, well, his cohort at the time, were waiting on a plane in an airport. We had this conference call, Glenn and I. That call was electric. They ended up missing their flight. And by the end of the call, we were going to Pawleys Island to sync up with these guys. To make a long story short, that movement, 3DM, really trained us how to live into this space of mid-sized communities. And they had a lot of tools to teach us how to do it.
Yeah.
So ideas like up in and out, or the theology of a covenant and kingdom theology, a Kairos circle. I mean, all of this might just be jargon to a lot of you guys, but a lot of you remember that season and remember that as a sovereign foundation in our life together in God. But probably the greatest thing that we got from that movement, 3DM, was this concept of spiritual family. Yeah. I think that wrote on us more than any other thing. And it's still with us today. It's still very much in our imagination today. It's still very much in the lifeblood of the Gathering Network. It's this idea that we exist in family for a reason, that the kingdom of God is manifest more in families that work than even in, large gatherings.
Family, it's like one of the most beautiful things, and it's a beautiful metaphor.
Yeah.
But it's also really difficult, as we felt. So where does family break down? And in the Gathering story, it's like we're running in missional communities as a spiritual family. Things get hard.
Yeah, so we really jumped into that right about 2010. And I would say that between 2010 to 2018, that was kind of the Gathering Network's like first, we're going to call that the first decade, right? And in that window, man, it started off, I mean, it was a beautiful dream. It's a beautiful dream. And it was not hard to win people to that dream, because we were talking about relationships at work and how to really know Jesus. And we were talking about all this great stuff. But we didn't know what we didn't know. And that's the way it is with all pioneering movements, right? We didn't know what we didn't know. And we jumped into it and we gave it our all. We gave it like a solid college try, and before long, it probably took about 5 years. So maybe 2010, about 2015, right about 2015, between 2015 and 2018, we started to experience this window of, I don't know if I would call it burnout, but we'd had enough experience making disciples that we realized discipleship is awesome in the beginning, but it can also break your heart, like you can like sow your life, time, energy into somebody, and then that person can leave, or that person can leave the faith, or that, you know what I mean? And it's like, after that much investment, that can just really hurt, right? That happened to Jesus. Like we see it in John 6, like in John 6, Jesus has all the people, they're all following him. He's really cool and popular, and then he teaches this hard teaching in John 6. And at the end of it, everybody leaves. And his disciples, he's like, what about you? Are you going to go? And they're like, where else would we go? Like, you're the one who has words of life, Yeah. So Jesus is left with like 12, after he was like the cool guy. And then Gethsemane rolls around and his night on trial before the cross. And then they all leave him, right? And then,
so there's a precedent that's been set, it's like there's this theology of disappointment and, in discipleship and the difficulties of it.
Absolutely. There's sort of this idea that Jesus is modeling, again, by his life, that life in the kingdom is not always easy. Like, it's not always easy. Life in the kingdom can be very disappointing. Life building the kingdom, life manifesting the kingdom can be very disappointing, very disorienting. It requires a different frame to endure it than the modern church frame, which is bigger, better, louder, kind of divorced from the people a little bit, like come sit, come watch us, and then Jesus wasn't really doing that. Jesus was really doing like life on life, close enough that like his friends could leave him,
Yeah.
His friends could leave him, and his friends could disappoint him, and his friends could abandon him, And we started to taste some of that. We started to taste, that experience where some missional communities start with an amazing entrepreneurial idea, and they're great until like some weeds in relationships start to grow up. And you start to realize, man, I don't actually have a skill to tell someone the truth or how to be honest with somebody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
That kind of stuff. Yeah. And so all of this goes to kind of like at the end of 2018, and a lot of the missional communities that we had on the board were kind of fallen to the side. Some were strong, but others really weren't. We had less really strong ones, and then there was just sort of this theme of disappointment that was rising in the people. And what was happening actually was this life that God had called us to was bringing us to the end of a life stage.
Yes.
Bringing us to the end of our childhood emotionally, and exposing our need to grow in other skills so that we could really live the dream out.
I've heard you talk about that moment as when we needed to circle the wagons. Like we needed to come together and we needed some new skills and new resources to equip us into the next life stage.
Yeah, man. It took us about 2 years to really fully diagnose what was really going on, right? So between 2017 to 2019, we were really asking what was going on a leadership level. But also what was happening was during that time, Glenn was multiplying his leadership into Jordan and I. And he was like, guys, I'm feeling like it's time for me to go and it's time for you guys to leave. That happened in 2019. Glenn multiplied his ministry. He had been doing that all along, but he handed the ministry of the Gathering Network to us in an amazing way. And JB and I began to lead into the future at that time. And one of the very first things that we felt we needed to do was we needed to wait on the Lord for a new 2.0 era for the Gathering Network, where the 2010 to 2018, 19, 2020 era would be like the 1.0 experience. We were going to be waiting on the 2.0 experience. And that 2.0 experience was going to begin in late 2019 by us all coming back together weekly in a weekly all together, which we hadn't done since that 2004 to 2008 window,
Wow. Yes.
And so we're like, we're going to reconvene. We're actually going to bring missional communities down. We're actually not going to make a big push into discipleship. We're actually going to come together to worship and pray again. We're going to come together to minister to one another again. We're going to come together to process our disappointments. We're going to come together to receive again this breath of the Spirit. We knew at that time, even though I don't think we said it clearly enough, JB and I, we knew that it was going to be for a limited amount of time and that we would eventually move back into an era where we were back in home groups, maybe house churches. But we didn't really get to see it all the way through because COVID hit.
Right.
Then
boom, see online. Here we are right now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. What a wreck. What a train wreck, COVID was initially, But I actually think COVID has been a gift for us, at least in terms of what's happened at the Gathering Network, because that 2020 window, that space through that year where we really dove into attachment theory, which really was the outgrowth of what we had been getting through the influence of Kim and Steve Specker, their introduction, the way that they introduced life, a lot of the neurotheology stuff. And I'm sorry if that jargon, if you're new to the Gathering and you don't know what we're talking about this marriage of brain science and theology, where brain science is actually helping us understand how our brains work and how we can be transformed. That really helps us in our work of transformational discipleship. It helps us to know, how is it that the brain actually gets transformed? What is it that actually transforms a person? And what we've realized is that people experience an acceleration in transformation when they are in bonded and attached relationships. Like relationships of Hesed love. That word Hesed is going to mean more to us as we study that through this coming summer. But it's this idea of biblical love, sticky love, covenant love, like really in it together, kind of committed love for one another, where we know we really, really belong. We can see each other and we can hear each other and we can bear each other's burdens. And, a lot more on that next week, because we're going to tell the 2021 story next week.
Yeah.
But I'm going to leave us with this right now. Like, we went into 2020 with a need to grow in our emotional awareness, our emotional health. We have not been talking about our feelings. We have not been talking about secure attachment to get like into this navel gazing space where it's really all about us and what we're feeling. No, we're doing this so that we can get to know ourselves, and so that our inner world can be healed again, so that a lot of the pain that was exposed through this last journey that we've experienced together, a lot of our experience that really exposed our immaturity and our lack of emotional awareness and our lack of emotional maturity, we needed to address those things, because we now know that movements, healthy movements, sustainable movements are led by healthy leaders. And so we just needed to enter into a space where we were paying attention to what was inside us. And what's inside us is an attachment story. And so it's an attachment to God, self, and others. And that's really why we've been entering into that. What's been our latest and newest sovereign foundation is this idea of attachment to God. I will forever be so thankful for Kim and Steve for bringing so much of those resources to us that have really helped us right at this moment on our journey.
It's such helpful context to even think back to that first sovereign foundation of leadership training and how it connects all the way to becoming emotionally healthy leaders to do this in a sustainable way. So Jon, thank you for taking us back through that and reminding us who God has called us as a church to be.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, like even just a few weeks ago when we made the announcement that we just acquired a training center, I think if I'm new to the Gathering Network, I'm like, what's a training center and why do we need a training center? When in fact, the training center is so deeply rooted in who we have always been. Because what I believe, and we're going to talk a lot about this next week, what the future demands are churches that are filled with safe and highly skilled leaders. And we have to devote a whole lot of time and attention to training up a new skill set in tomorrow's leaders. This is who the Gathering Network has always been. And it's one of our deepest sovereign foundations. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited about what's to come. Hey, can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
Tell me now what you heard. Like, what sovereign foundations did you just hear in all of that?
Yeah, some of the ones that definitely stood out were leadership training as a core sovereign foundation, prayer and worship, and that being connected to making wrong things right, and justice. And then moving into spiritual family, that's going to be the vehicle for prayer and worship and justice in the world. And then finally having secure attachment to Christ as the foundation below it all that makes safe, skilled, effective leaders who can shepherd the next generation.
Yeah, amazing, man. That's amazing. You're a good listener, dude. You're a really, really, really good listener.
I was listening. I was here.
All right, well, together, man, we're going to send everybody right now into our discussion and application time this morning. And what we want you to do this morning is, as a group or even as a family, we want you to begin to mine out for yourself the sovereign foundations that you heard in this story that we just told. I think we have maybe another 2 or 3 questions there for you this morning, but just start there this morning. Jack and I love you. We're really grateful to be doing life together with you, and we'll see you guys next week.